up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. I've had that strange feeling about the IDAHO student slayings, and I haven't been able to put my finger on what that thing is that's wrong with it until now. Until now that an article has appeared in Airmail written by Howard Bloom. This is an extract. Before he could make his move, before this is Steve Gonzalez could get in a room and have a heart-to-heart talk with a witness, he was unexpectedly stopped in his tracks by the FBI. The Bureau had sent an official letter to Steve's attorney in Moscow, and Shannon Gray was warned that if there were any attempt to contact the individual Steve had been suing, there would be legal consequences. And that's really the bottom line here. There will be legal consequences to doing this thing that you want to do, this person that you want to talk to. Kaylee's father goes on to say, there is so much more to the story than there is in the media. Well, of course there is. Of course there is. When a murder is committed, it goes to trial, and it's in the trial, in that forum, that you find out what happened. Police and prosecutors play their cards there in court. And part of that process, in terms of not revealing evidence, is to try to preserve an unbiased jury, thereby guaranteeing the defendant a fair trial. That's how justice works. What we're seeing instead is a sort of vigilante via media attitude. Why? Where does this distrust of authority, this distrust of police and the justice system, where's it coming from? I think that's a stupid question. It's coming from literally everywhere. And this is the result of it. It manifests. It manifests as potentially impinging on the legal process. This attitude of distrust to the law. Do you notice there seems to be a widespread ignorance of due process? But that's not really it, is it? It's not ignorance, it's opposition to due process. It's, oh, there's such a thing as due process? I don't care. Well, we should care. The same article by Howard Bloom, it talks about one of the witnesses who I've been just referring to as D, saying that apparently she and the other survivor allegedly had not only been awake while the killings had taken place, they had actually heard everything. And that is kind of what the affidavit suggests, certainly in terms of one of them. Now it's apparent that apparently both of them, and astonishingly, apparently the two girls had been texting one another while the crime was taking place. But this is the word that I disagree with in Bloom's analysis. He says, while the murderer methodically went from room to room. I don't think it was a methodical crime at all. It was bungled at the end. It was bungled at the beginning. He left the knife sheath there. A dog started barking in the middle of it. The killer had to do a man-on-man combat with another male, which I don't think he thought he would do or expected to do. And it was after that he left the house. And when he leaves, he's seen, you've just committed quadruple murder, now you're seen by a witness. It's not even close to the perfect murder. And people were saying that this person was such a slick criminal that he must be a serial killer. Now, I'm sure you guys have heard sort of this aspect, from the article, but I want to take it a step further. It's something that is happening not only in America, but around the world. Let's criticize the media. It's not reliable. Let's criticize the police as not reliable. Let's criticize all these authority systems. And the result of that is you start to say that, well, if you say, well, there's something wrong with the world, now suddenly there's something wrong with everything. But then somebody benefits out of that. It's either a politician or it's a pundit on YouTube, benefit out of that distrust. Don't believe in anyone, believe me, come to me. And that is what is becoming quite scary and quite dangerous. But you're seeing it play out in a practical way in a way that's shooting the legal process in the foot in the Koberger case. Do you want this case to be prosecuted or not? Do you want the prime suspect to potentially get away with murder? Do you want that to happen? Do you want to hear the evidence that they've found, yes or no? Well, you know where that happens? In a courtroom. That's how it's been happening for hundreds of years. That's what you do in a civilized democracy. Due process, if you don't know, is a course of legal proceedings based on rules and principles, legal rules and legal principles that have been established over a long period of time in a system of jurisprudence for the enforcement and protection of private rights in service of the public. And what happens when the public don't know how those rules work? What happens? Well, it looks like social media happens. It looks like the folks in true crime educate the victims' families and say what is not acceptable and etc. Are you the right people to be giving legal advice in a legal setting? Now, before we get to some of the consequences of that, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, which is I've studied the law, I've sat in courtrooms, and you can decide for yourself whether you want someone who's credible, who's written books, who's knows something about all of this, or whether you want to feel strongly about certain things that you think are unacceptable. Can you discern the truth, or do you want to reward things that are novel, that are impactful, that are speedy? You get a speedy analysis. So you reward interestingness, right? But then you punish intuitive findings, incremental progress, insight, real insight, care, curiosity and openness, and then also reality. Ultimately, it is a choice between fantasy and reality, between novelty and intuitive findings that are sort of based on rational thought. Basically, it's feeling versus fact. Which side are you on in terms of in a legal setting? Feeling versus fact. And I've been to Moscow. I've felt what it's like being there, but I also am very aware of what happened there and the process that needs to unfold. I mean, I literally went from one trial in Boise, drove up the road to where another case, the Koberger case, was still playing out in the legal sense. The legal process is a process. You don't just get an instant answer when you have a question. And you've got to wait for that forum to be ready for all of those questions to come up, everybody to be ready, and then the process to unfold. And then one's got to watch that and potentially participate in it respectfully. And how can you wait and see when you have been trained to reward interestingness, novelty, speed, impact, and all of that kind of instant gratification online? Well, when the real world, especially in a legal setting, doesn't work that way. Anyway, if you're finding this episode worthwhile, please like, share, leave your comment. Let's hear what you think. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. Now, first of all the victims' families in this case deserve our utmost sympathy and compassion. That's not a matter of debate. What they've been put through is unconscionable. And when one is emotionally compromised, and they are, it's understandable that one may say and do some things that perhaps one wouldn't do otherwise. It's not as understandable when you're doing it again and again, and you are pushing back against the law. Now, I'm not trying to take pot shots at Steve Gonsalves or make it personal, but the fact is Kaylee's father was also kind of a sideshow during the original police investigation when no one knew who committed this crime, when very little information was given out. Kaylee Gonsalves' father was in the middle of the whole media cycle, and it was, you kind of felt that what the cops eventually did to try and deal with this was they sort of threw him and us a bone in terms of, okay, well, we're looking for this vehicle. The police had a strategy, and they wanted to hold their cards close to their chest while looking for the perpetrator. Meanwhile, Kaylee's father was insisting on being told what was going on, and also insisting on talking to the media at every opportunity. So every time the police didn't say anything, Kaylee's father did. And so there was this killer on the loose during a active quadruple murder investigation, and you had Kaylee's father criticizing what he called the lack of accountability from Moscow police. You may remember he accused the cops of messing up 1 million times. This was a few days before Kohberger was caught. There were some people who said that he called Moscow police cowards. I think he denied that. But there was all of this opprobrium somewhere around the 18th of December. Do you remember that? 2 weeks before Kohberger was apprehended, you had this person basically demanding attention. And it's understandable in a certain sense. But now we are almost a year later, and the same thing is happening. And it's happening because of a distrust of the system. You know, eventually Steve apologized to the police. He said I think it was January 6th, somewhere around there, he said, what did he say? Something about all is forgiven in terms of the police. But look where we are now, a couple of months later. Now it's demands to basically interfere with the legal process. Almost the sense of, because I'm impatient and I need answers, there must be answers. But there is a process that's underway. And I understand what's happening. One has been taught not to trust in these institutions. And so that's what's happening. But this is how you can shoot a legal process in the foot. Do you want the defendant in this case to eventually, when there is a legal process, there could be a mistrial? Do you want to shoot the legal process in the foot? Because this is the way how to do it. You know, Kaylee's father hired a lawyer to try to force the police to communicate with him. Now the FBI are telling that same lawyer, this far and no further. And it's to do with a witness that doesn't want, or wants to go on the record under certain conditions. And you can understand those conditions given how other people involved in this case have been put through the ringer. They've been traumatized. And so they want to testify, but they also don't want to be part of a media spectacle, which has got nothing to do with the whole justice, the pursuit of justice. In fact, it seems to be undermining it. And I'm one of the first people to say, you see how slowly the wheels of justice turn. They can turn quickly. We saw that in the Chris Watts case. But you see how long cases take to come to trial. Look how long the Morphew case is taking. And it's not something that it seems to be something that is wrong with society.
That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there.
The fact is, trials can take years to be heard and finalized. This isn't the first time that has happened. Meanwhile, the court has attempted to control the court of public opinion. That's becoming harder and harder. And what they've tried to do is issue increasingly stringent gag orders. Meanwhile, Kaylee's family and News Nation have done their utmost to try and find and evaluate evidence, as well as try Kohberger in the court of public opinion prior to trial. And you've had people like Blum saying in these documentaries, the case is more open than shut, in his opinion. In a recent article by Howard Blum, who to my knowledge, he's not a legal expert, Howard Blum. He doesn't have a background in law or legal reporting. He's not a veteran of true crime. We see how Steve Gonsalves has been trying to investigate the killer independently through Howard Blum's report. And then he seems to almost sanction that by saying, who's he to judge? He's a father, or something like that. And meanwhile, you're seeing Blum and Steve Gonsalves both participating in the same documentary. And I don't think this is simply random. At the end of an article which is about law enforcement having to intervene to protect a witness in a pending quadruple murder trial, the writer says something along the lines of, who am I to judge? I'm a father, and so on. Well, maybe you should judge. Maybe you should think about how these processes play out. And the court needs to be inside the courtroom. And I think there's a way to, and because I did it myself, there's a way to write narratives prior to a trial. And the way you do that is you stay away from prognosticating on guilt or innocence. And what you instead do is you simply look at what the facts are. You stay away from undermining the police, which you see so often in a defense case, and you simply look at what the evidence is. And even Bloom looks at the DNA, and then he says something like, so it's not Bloom who says that, but he quotes Gonzalez saying, there is so much more to the story than is in the media. But that's exactly how this works. It's not a conspiracy, and it's not up to the media to expose it. It's up to lawyers, expert witnesses, police people, and it all plays out in the forum of a court. So on the question, where does the distrust for law enforcement come from? What do you think is happening right now in the news, where people are supposedly on trial and what is being said about the people trying those people? In retrospect, I would say Moscow PD have done, this is my opinion, I would say Moscow PD have done a phenomenal job. Despite criticism coming from as far afield as John Ramsey, entering or participating in the media cycle, comparing Moscow PD to Boulder PD in the 90s, I would actually say Moscow PD have done a great job. So what is happening? Where does this trust come from? I would say social media has got a big role to play in that. True crime is constantly know-it-alling and conspiracy calling and undermining due process in favor of themselves. Let me say that again. True crime undermining due process in favor of themselves. Turn to me. If you want justice, turn to me. Subscribe to me and you'll get justice. Really, do you think so? I have to say, as someone who has sat in trial next to court reporters, I'm astonished at the low standards we've seen regarding the coverage of this trial from some journalists. In a way you can say, well, social media, that's part comes with the territory. But media people, reporters, people who have been trained in journalism, their standards have been dropping as well. Don't they know the law either? And I mean, that makes it even worse when you've got legal journalists doing the same thing. Have they forgotten about due process as well, or simply chosen to ignore it? Gag order, snag order, who gives a shit? I do. And, it's becoming harder and harder to prosecute cases and trying to allow for, freedom of information and trying to incorporate the public interest. Because the public interest seems to be shooting the public interest in the foot. The public interest seems to not know what is in its best interest anymore. The worst case scenario in this case, if you continue ignoring due process, is you end up with a mistrial. That is probably what's going to be argued in the Laurie Vallow appeal. You end up not being able to prosecute your suspect. You're so eager, so greedy for whatever it is, revenge or sound bites, justice or banging on one's own drum. What should be a proper prosecution becomes a circus. We see it again and again in high-profile cases, and it's getting worse. YouTubers win and everybody else loses. True crime wins, or should I say fake crime wins, by shooting the whole process in the foot. Meanwhile, claiming they are championing the whole process. Let me say this again. You try criminal cases in a criminal court with qualified people, not on camera, by reporters, by people who are being indignant. It's not feelings that are dealt with in a courtroom, it's facts.
You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there.
That psychology has been weaponized to also undermine the things that are right in the world. Yes, there are some things that are wrong with the world, but there are also some things that are functioning. And I want to make a small petty observation about something Bloom said in that 48 Hours documentary, where he says he thinks the case is more open than shut. Based on what you know.
The prosecution would like everyone to believe that it's an open and shut case. But I think the facts they have make the case more open than open and shut.
Listen to those words. I think the facts they have. Well, you don't know what the facts are. You think you know what the facts are, but you don't know what the facts are. And it's the nature of an affidavit that you're not going to play your full hand, you're going to play part of your hand. And so I just think that we're dealing with someone who doesn't have a lot of experience with this, that is now active in this whole narrative, producing a narrative in the run-up, quite a detailed narrative that's now being, recruited into the media narrative. And it's almost becoming a default narrative. And so the longer it takes for this trial to take place, the more it is being kind of hijacked by people who really got nothing to do with the case. The people who should be talking about this are the witnesses, law enforcement, and experts. But meanwhile, it's everybody else. This same author wrote on October 8th, just yesterday, the more I dig, the more the plot thickens. Obviously it does. This is a quadruple murder case. Obviously there's more that is happening. And that is why a trial is on the horizon. And this is not a dig at Bloom. He's a great writer, he's a successful writer. But what does he write about? He writes about Germany's secret war. He writes about espionage. He writes about code breakers and something about UFOs. I'm just looking for the story. The government's secret quest for extraterrestrials. I don't really see anything here about a murder trial. Somehow all of that intrigue about spies and government double agents is now becoming part of this story. Does it really belong here? Nevertheless, he has emerged as a de facto authority on the Idaho case, as well as a sort of narrating expert in documentaries. And his position is basically in defense of Koberger, from how I have understood it, in the sense that he seems to believe there isn't enough evidence to convict him. And this seems to be catching on. And this seems to be causing concern for people like Steve Gonsalves. The job of the defense is simply to raise reasonable doubt. Well, Bloom, who isn't a lawyer, and as I say, seems fairly new to true crime, he's doing a phenomenal job at that. He's also made small errors, I think. I think he described Koberger via the affidavit in a documentary as wearing black and a black mask.
And if there is no connection, then there is no motive. And if there is no motive, then it becomes very hard to make the case that he is the killer.
That's simply not true. You don't need a motive in order to prove a case. You simply need to prove intent. And you can also prove that someone was at the scene. That's another way that you can prove it. And so this is just someone who doesn't seem to know all of these things about how the law works. It does seem incomprehensible that you don't need a motive in a murder trial, but you don't. And I've sat in on a couple of murder trials where they prove the case, the person's convicted, and afterwards they say, you know what, we still don't know why this happened. It's not part of the legal requirement. It's good to have, but it's not something that you absolutely have to have. Henry van Bedar, they don't know the motive. Well, the court didn't know it. Oscar Pistorius as well. Another example where I think they got the motive wrong was murder. I don't think the motive was that he was trying to protect the legacy. But there's another way of proving your case. Bloom also said during the 48 Hours documentary that this case will be always part of Moscow's history. Well, obviously, he's doing a really good job at making sure that that is the case. When you go to Moscow, and I would love to know if he has, if you go to Moscow, you sort of realize that there's more to Moscow than 1122 King Road. That there's more than, or as much as we care about these students, for victims and the perpetrator, there are thousands of other students whose lives also need to be taken care of and protected, and their interests also need to be served. And is it in their interest to be told to disbelieve law enforcement, have no faith in law enforcement? Do you remember when they were looking for the killer? Imagine being told, oh, the police don't know what they're doing. Meanwhile, the police need them to talk to them to help them solve the case. But no, don't trust law enforcement. Well, how are you going to get justice in this case? One of the things I care about, and I think I'm different to a lot of my fellow true crime YouTubers in this regard, is I care about sort of the greater good in terms of society, protecting society, trying to make sure that where we are going, the direction we're going as a community, as a culture, is in the right direction. And what I can tell you now is we are not going in the right direction. YouTubers benefit by telling you that everything is very scary and worse than they think, and then saying, come to me and I'll provide you with a solution and with security. And of course they don't. Who does provide justice in the real world? YouTubers don't. Juries do. Prosecutors and court people that take all of these circumstances and discuss them and evaluate them. That's where morality and the quality of a decent society is decided. And so if you want to ruin that, if you want to undermine that, if you want to cause instability, if you want to cause the society to fall apart, keep going the way you're going. There's also somewhere where Blum describes Coburger via the affidavit, I think I was touching on that earlier, as wearing black and a black mask. I don't know if we actually know that his mask was black, and you might say that's being a little bit nitpicky. Maybe it is. But in the affidavit it says that we know he was wearing black, but I don't think he was wearing a black mask. I think he was actually just wearing a COVID mask, right? Something that was like a COVID thing. And from illustrations and other descriptions I've seen, I kind of got the idea that it was a white mask, or certainly not a black mask, and not a mask made out of material, from what I understood. The point is, we don't actually know if this mask was black, and this is making assumptions as though everything in that affidavit is gospel. And it's little variations and distortions like these that can ruin the whole symphony. I want to end off by just talking about Newsweek. Newsweek recently posted a vacuous piece, in my opinion, around the idea of cops not having the murder weapon. It's the same nonsense as without a motive, you're not going to have, you're not going to be able to successfully prosecute. Without the murder weapon, there's no way you can prosecute this case. That's simply not true. These are the words of the article. Police are still stuck on a major question. Where's the knife? Where's the murder knife? Nobody knows. Documents released last week show that police have been seeking all of Koberger's search records for the word knife, all of his wish lists online, on online shopping sites, and all of his online purchases, in the hope of finding that he purchased a knife that matches the sheath found in the Idaho murder house. Can I tell you, I can't remember a case when we last had a murder weapon. Did they recover the murder weapons in the Murdoch case, those 2 rifles? No. How about the Morphew case? No. How about Laurie Vallow? No. In fact, in the Laurie Vallow case, they don't even know how one of the victims died. Or the Frazee case, the bat in that case, did they find that? No. Or in the Gabby Petito case, did they find the murder weapon there? True crime is rapidly becoming a thicket of idiots where the price of admission is free and the circuit acts are basically constant. And within all the sound and fury, real justice disappears like a ghost in the darkness. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.